Morning to each and every one of you. And may I first of all thank Dr. Jain and Dr. Joshi for inviting me to speak at this inaugural ceremony of the Padma Shri Dr. N. Jain National Debate Competition. My dear friends, and may I also perhaps ask the indulgence of Dr. Ansari and Dr. Jain and Professor Joshi, who is perhaps the chief architect of all this, to permit me to speak a few words at this inaugural session. My dear students, first of all, may I congratulate you on rising to what I call a challenge. I say to rise to a challenge, Dr. Jain, because we are today shaping our lives to work in an environment which is not usual. It's challenging. It's unsettling. So here we are, our students who are rising to this challenge to respond to COVID in a very, very strong and appropriate way. My dear students, debating sharpens skills. The law is full of language. It has to be spoken. Being articulate, therefore, is what we call in law a sine qua non, something that cannot be compromised upon. The topic today, I can assure you, has the potential to invoke great debate and the best of debating skills. The last thing one needs to worry about is the result of the debate. Who wins and who loses is not what is important. But what is important is that we learn to play the game even in the context of a pandemic. My dear students, let me briefly tell you as to what necessary skills you may wish to develop if you wish to become a good advocate. I'm not too sure about the truth of the perception that it only takes a genius to become a lawyer, although most lawyers would love to believe in it. Most of you would probably go into employment connected with the law. It must be appreciated that English is not the language of the English, but it has today become a universal language, like French, Spanish, and so on and so forth. You will soon discover that the basics of law is language and logic. So an aptitude for language, for skills in talking, is of great advantage. Lord Denning, one of the most celebrated English judges of the 20th century, who was known as the people's judge, whose judicial career spanned over 38 years, once quoted to say, open quotes, "To succeed in the profession of law, you must seek to cultivate a command of language. Words are the lawyer's tools of trade," he said. On the words you use, Lord Denning says, your client's future might depend. The reason why words are so important are because words are the vehicles of thought. And that's what we are teaching you to do. To use words in the context of the text so that they become the vehicles of our thought. My dear friends, you will no doubt appreciate that the legal profession language is used for many users, inclusive, to negotiate. It is used to draft legal documents. It is used to structure arguments and place before a court certain legal propositions. The importance of vocabulary and grammar and the ability to be articulate, therefore, cannot be emphasized more. And Dr. Joshi and Dr. Jain, I must say, I must congratulate the two of you for creating this opportunity for our young minds to sharpen their skills of speech by this debating competition. Now let me get to the topic. Is free medical testing of COVID-19 in India justified? I'm going to not make a long speech about it, but I just want to leave you with a few thoughts that you might debate upon. You all know that private diagnostic laboratories in India had just started testing for COVID-19 when the Supreme Court ordered that all tests be carried out free. Now, the laboratory said that they thought the order would say the rich would pay and the government would pay for the poor. At 4,500 Indian rupees, it was not cheap. But the court did not clarify if and how private laboratories would be reimbursed. Some laboratories, therefore, stopped testing. An anxious, of course, obviously, an anxious federal government petitioned the court to reconsider the matter, and the court graciously did. Now, what does this new order say? Well, according to this new order issued on the 13th of April of this year, the government will reimburse private laboratories for testing the 500 million covered by a project for public health insurance for the people. The rest of them would have to pay. Now, but the volte-face or the turnaround, this whole turnaround by the courts gave rise to an important question to debate, in my view. Can India, I'm throwing this open for the debaters to put their mind to, can India scale up testing for COVID-19 if it is not free? If it is not free, how quickly can India be sterile for economic growth? Can it be quick enough to regain its stature as a safe destination for tourism and for investors looking for a safe place for investment? Will the free testing pay off? These are questions, I believe, that looms in the horizon, my dear students, for your consideration. India's number, 15,712 active cases and 507 deaths, are relatively low for a country of 1.35 billion. Many believe this is because it's still testing too little. As of Sunday, there had been 386,791 cases. But scaling up is a challenge. All of this has made testing expensive. It's free at government hospitals and laboratories. And for months, there were only ones permitted for even the only ones that could have tested for corona. But soon, private entities were inducted to support India's overburdened health system. You can ask the question, my dear students, therefore, what is the ultimate policy objective? Isn't it well beyond dealing with a pandemic, I ask? We can't be myopic in this whole thing. Do measures to manage and control an investment or expenditure, such as free testing, that would it return dividends beyond what the eye sees, is my question to you. At the end of all the panic, could we turn round to the global community and particularly the manufacturing industry in East Asia and say India and Sri Lanka perhaps is a safe country to relocate investment? We will be happy to offer you a conducive environment. Come. Isn't the cost of the free testing then a justifiable policy decision? There you are, my dear students. The government kept the price of test at 4,500 at home and 3,500 in a hospital based on the recommendations of an expert committee. The case for free testing. We know that presently tests are carried out only if a doctor advises them to do so. But the long wait at government hospitals and the prohibitive cost at private ones could deter even those with symptoms from showing up in these hospitals. Somebody said that if you want to contain a pandemic, you can't have testing determined by costs. No doubt, undoubtedly so. But is it possible that we look at the scenario well beyond the important advantage of controlling a pandemic and a pandemic alone? That's my question. There are large groups of people just above the poverty line that are also struggling, and there are middle-class workers who have been laid off and can't afford to pay for their families to get tested. So what's the uptake in this? If you really want to push up testing rates across the country, you cannot expect everyone to pay out their pockets. They must be funded by the government, and you will see the government of Vietnam perhaps is just doing exactly the same thing. And what do the scientists say? The scientists say that you cannot contain the virus unless you know who has it. Surely that's not rocket science to understand. So it is your interest to make sure there is universal access. We cannot rely on private charity to free ourselves from an international public health emergency, my dear students. And now with private hospitals in the mix, it's going to be harder for the government to retain control of its testing strategy. Of course, testing would become cheaper as more homegrown kits are approved. As I see, India is also considering pool testing, which involves collecting a large number of samples and testing them in one go. What it means is that if the test is negative, nobody has the virus, but if it is positive, everyone who gave samples has to be tested individually. It's definitely a good way to reduce costs as long as it's done efficiently and smartly. If you can fix the price of raw materials, you can fix the overall price. My dear students, it is likely that the country will, if you look at foreign aid, let's look at this, the other angle to this, the pandemic. There is a school of thought that highlights the role of aid as a foreign policy tool. It has been demonstrated that a number of countries had used aid as a part of campaigns to become a temporary member of the United Nations Security Council. This is neither a new phenomenon nor one practiced by one country. The richer states in the world have used transfers of goods, services, and funds as a means of interacting with other countries. And that while it is hard to pinpoint which goals aid actually achieves, but aid has always been geopolitical and it has had geopolitical ramifications. So foreign aid and loans have been a substantial share of the total government budget of, for example, for a country like Sri Lanka. It is likely that the country, Sri Lanka, will seek assistance from donor nations. Given the economic impact of COVID-19, very few nations are likely to be in a position to assist Sri Lanka. And so far, it's only India and China that has offered a concessionary loan to us. The pandemic has reinforced the links between health, environment, and the economy. But this crisis, my dear students, think about it, demonstrates that governments and individuals are capable of strong and rapid action in the face of an overarching challenge. As India looks to show up its economy, it is worth reflecting on the other systemic actions that are needed to shift towards a more sustainable and resilient economy. And let's look at a few of those options. Number one, can we invest in sustainable infrastructure? Now, when I say that, what I mean is infrastructure investments are an effective way to boost economic activity and create jobs. Now, I'm looking at the good side of this. How do we make maximum use of the pandemic? It has been seen that a stimulus towards green measures rebounded faster than other economies in the Organization for Economic Cooperation, in the OECD. Investments in clean energy, public transport, and so on and so forth. Should India, I ask the question, I throw this question to the debaters, should India take this opportunity to increase support for renewable energy, particularly rooftop solar, through appropriate policies and business models? Decentralized solar power can help spread critical services in remote regions if the upfront capital constraints can be addressed. Number two, can we build the resilience for the most vulnerable in the community? About 90% of our workforce is informally employed, which includes short-term contract workers. This population is extremely vulnerable to economic shocks and needs greater access to formal credit and social safety nets such as insurance and pension schemes. Lastly, it is critically important to expand access to clean water, clean air, and primary health care. Thirdly, can we use fiscal mechanisms for the recovery and resilience to this whole pandemic while promoting low carbon development? The government of India has announced an economic stimulus of Indian rupees 1.7 trillion, which is $24 billion, and is exploring another bailout of Indian rupees 750 billion for micro, small, and medium enterprises, among them for measures to come out of this pandemic. Several sectors like aviation and the auto industry will need support. Fourthly, can we encourage long-term change in behavior? The current crisis has changed patterns of consumption. For example, electricity usage patterns have shifted as people are working from home on more flexible schedules. So there are behavioral changes. Finally, fifthly, can we regulate enabling technologies? Right. It is useful, therefore, to consider, I ask the debaters, that the future may see great employment in the freelance, short-term economy and e-commerce sectors, as well as in new technologies that can help support future response and resilience mechanisms. Therefore, the decisions taken today can provide immediate relief, but also secure a lasting economic recovery, increase community resilience, and ensure a long-term pathway to sustainable development. The question for you then, isn't it then the case that we shouldn't let this opportunity slip away? Isn't free testing then a worthwhile exercise? I'm leaving you with food for thought, my dear students. In my view, with all respectfully, this may present the opportunity to attract investment opportunity for those business entities desirous of leaving vulnerable regions for safer territories such as India and Sri Lanka. Think about it. All this is possible if we ensure that our environment is disease-free. If free medical testing results in a disease-free country, then such policy is surely justified, isn't it? I wish every participant and team, therefore, these are little thoughts that I have left you with. I wish every participant and team an enjoyable discourse in a debate in a virtual environment, right? Which might seem unsettling, but that perhaps is a challenge to all of us, my dear students. We must face this challenge in the confidence that we will succeed. We must face this challenge in the confidence that we must succeed, as our forefathers did in times far more difficult than what we are faced with today. It is my prayer and wish that you will emerge victorious in setting a course through this debate to address a policy that would contribute to good health of the nation, that would gain us the reputation that South Asia is a region of peace and prosperity, and a region in which people can settle down to invest profitably. I wish the participating teams and each one of you a great debate. I can assure you that we are, as someone said, that all of us are in it together. I wish you all luck, and I congratulate Dr. Jain and Dr. Joshi and the faculty for putting in place this debating competition as a remembrance, as perhaps an honor to Padma Shri Dr. N.N. Jain, the founder of this great institution. And I'm confident that in this institution, with this kind of policy, will rise to new horizons of legal education and in management.